This video is brought to you by making a list of obscure and obvious movie references and then compiling them into a YouTube video. Venom, to its credit, isn't a movie whose sole purpose it is to set up the next 6 movies in the franchise. You know, like Sony's last attempt to kick off a cinematic universe. In fact, despite being based off a character that's directly linked to that of Spider-Man, this is a mostly Spider-Man reference-free film. Mostly! I mean, I say mostly because this film is littered with Easter eggs and references that touch on the characters of Eddie Brock, Carlton Drake, Roland Treese. Who's that? We'll get into it. As well as specific comic book stories and arcs from various Venom storylines, plus locations, cameos, and more things I'd probably imagine. No, there are definitively more things. This is pre-written. We're going to talk about whether this is the MCU. That's another thing we're going to talk about. So spoilers for Venom. These are the topics I'm going to be hitting on. Not hitting on in like a weird way. I shouldn't have phrased it like that. But look, there's time codes in the description if you want to jump around a bit. Okay, let's Easter egg. Starting with characters. Now, Eddie Brock is translated pretty closely from the comics, despite missing the key element of him being in the media like Peter Parker. Then he misreports, causing his firing, and then he goes to church to kill himself, but then he gets the Venom symbiote suit, however you say it, and then he becomes the character of Venom. But why am I explaining this to you? You've seen Spider-Man 3, it's a tale as old as time. There are, however, elements of that comic book story that are hinted at. Because again, Eddie Brock is a reporter, except this time he's making video reports for the internet, I think? He mentions also at the end of the film that he's thinking of going into the written word, which is much more in line with when we first met him in the 80s. We also see a bench press in his apartment, something that he frequently uses in the comics. This is mentioned in passing, but it's said in this film that he moved from New York to LA due to an incident, which was basically that he was reporting on a killer called the Sin Eater. A person then comes forth claiming to be this Sin Eater, but it's revealed by Spider-Man that he's just some guy who's always confessing to everything all the time. So Eddie Brock is disgraced and fired. So in the movie, we get his fiancée and then ex-fiancée, Anne Wang, leaving him. Now in both mediums this happens, and in both mediums she's a lawyer, but in the comics they're married and then she divorces him. At one point also, like in the movies, she becomes She-Venom and murders several people, but rather than being kind of thrilled about it, like we saw, she's absolutely mortified and then takes her own life. Carlton Drake is a B-grade villain from the comics, with him again also being a member of the Life Foundation. His claim to fame is splitting the 5 symbiotes, however you say it, off Venom and creating a team of alien monsters, one of which being Riot, who we saw, and he also bonds with. Riot's ultimate goal in the movie mirrors that of the comics. He basically wants to kick off an alien invasion of Earth. The EMT, who's played by Michelle Lee, is credited as Donna, and in the comics, Donna was one of the human hosts, whom becomes a symbiote, however you say it, who was an offshoot of Venom. Carlton Drake's lead mercenary tough guy is Roland Treese. Roland Treese is traditionally a member of the Life Foundation, but he's a board member. He's a minor character and he's in like a handful of comics or something. Look, he's not really anyone of note, but he does have a goatee, so that's something. But nobody really knows what happened to him, he just kind of disappeared. It's really a mystery, but it's not an interesting mystery because nobody cares what happened to him. There's a very subtle hint towards one J. Jonah Jameson, which was exciting to see. So at the beginning of the film, we get the Life Foundation ship crash land into Earth. In some incarnations of the Venom character, it's John Jameson piloting it. J. Jonah Jameson's son. Yes, that's right, of Spider-Man 3 fame. You've seen it. He's the one who brings the alien life to Earth via a rocket ship. Now in the comics, John Jameson goes on to become a werewolf, except this time around he won't be a werewolf because he's killed in the crash. They really Jimmy Olsen'd Batman Superman'd him. You remember that? Just shot him in the head. What a film. Speaking of J. Jonah Jameson though, his rival in print media is Barney Buskins. And we see that name pop up. When Eddie is searching for work after being fired for doing the thing his boss and also his fiancée told him not to do, he messages him asking for work. Barney in the comics runs the Daily Globe, the newspaper that Eddie used to work for, and he ends up running it into the ground, and we don't really see much of him after that, but he still pops up occasionally, so I'm told. But honestly, before researching him, I never knew he existed. Okay, comics. Right, so we talked about the Sin Eater thing. I probably should have saved that for here, but I didn't. But what we can talk about is Venom's hunger for chocolate. Now, I didn't find out this till recently also, and it does feature in the next Caravan of Garbage episode coming up. Bloody look out for that, it's an absolute doozy. But one of the things that keeps Venom from murdering everyone all the time is chocolate. This was a 90s thing that was brought in because, you know, he became an anti-hero, so he murdered much less. I mean, he still murdered quite a bit, but less. The symbiotes, however you say it, is also said in the film to be a potential cure for cancer. In the Ultimate Universe, it wasn't an alien life form, but a scientific experiment designed to encase the subject and then cure them of anything that might ail them. This actually worked pretty well, but at the same time, it didn't work that well because it would also turn you into a murdering monster. Venom has also attached itself to many a person or thing in the comics, including a dog, like we saw in the movie, including one in order to escape the Arctic, and another called Samson in The Amazing Spider-Man 654. We also at one point see Riot tear the Venom mask right off Eddie Brock's face. That's similar to this comic book cover, where Carnage does the same thing. Back to him in a minute though. For some reason, kryptonite is mentioned in this film in reference to Venom's weaknesses. That means that within this comic book movie universe, where a handful of other Marvel characters exist, which also would mean, I guess, Marvel Comics don't exist in this world. But also if there's kryptonite, that means that there are DC comics at the very least, including Superman. But I guess that was just a shorthand way of explaining the character's vulnerabilities. Also, Superman was referenced in one of those Raimi Spider-Man films, or whatever. Here's a clip of that.
Can I do anything for you?
You do too much. College, a job, all this time with me. You're not Superman, you know.
You also see Stan Lee. That kind of caught me off guard because I've gotten used to seeing him mostly in the MCU films. At the end of the film, he says something about how it's nice to see you two back together, which could mean the symbiote, however you say it, and Eddie, or it could be the relationship between Anne and Eddie. It's weird though that Eddie Brock doesn't stop and be all, I'm sorry, old man, do I know you at all? You haven't appeared in this narrative up until this point, and yet here you are, saying it's good that we're back together again, implying that you've been watching us this entire time. Explain yourself! The law firm Anne works for is called Michelini and McFarlane, which is a nod to Venom creators David Michelini and Todd McFarlane. There you go. Right, so in terms of locations, this isn't set in New York, like you'd think it would be, as mentioned, but in the 90s there was actually a period in time where Eddie Brock did move to San Francisco and becomes this kind of underground protector of the homeless. We also see this reflected in the film, where he's compelled to question Drake about his experiments on human participants, and when he attempts to rescue his friend from the Life Foundation. Speaking of the Life Foundation though, that is an organization whose idea is, in the comics at least, that basically the world is a burning pile of trash that's never going to stop burning, and their sole purpose is to continue the human race in whichever way they see fit, as long as it's somewhat nefarious and involves some comic book villainry. The name of the building Eddie Brock lives in is called the Schuler Building. That was named after Marvel fan Randy Schuler, who was the one to suggest that Spider-Man take on the black costume when an open call was sent out for comic book ideas. For his services, he was offered the chance by Marvel to write his version, which basically had Reed Richards inventing this new suit, which was like 25% more adhesive. Marvel was like, no thank you, but here is $220 for your idea. And then a couple of years later, the black suit turned up for the first time, and then from there, that suit spawned multiple ideas and characters valued easily at hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars. But I sure hope Randy enjoyed his 220. Now I'm just going to touch on this briefly because I already made a video on it and it is linked below. But Cletus Cassidy shows up post-credits, played by Woody Harrelson, who's going to go on and evolve into Carnage in any and all future films. Like I said though, I got a video on that linked below. Feel free to check it out if you want to know more about Woody Harrelson in one of the dumbest looking on-screen wigs of the modern era. Okay, so does this film take place in the MCU? In short, no. I mean, it is set in San Francisco, like the Ant-Man films, but there's no reference to those. There's also no Spider-Man, despite rumors of a Tom Holland cameo. There's no Avengers talk, no character or event crossover whatsoever. However, there's not really anything in this film that says it definitively is not in the same universe. I mean, the links, like the J. Jonah Jameson thing, are tenuous at best, but I think depending on how audiences react and what the box office does, that the door has definitely been left just slightly ajar in case Marvel and Disney do deem it appropriate to bring Venom in. I mean, they don't really need to at this point, plus they got all the X-Men shit to deal with, so it seems kind of unlikely anytime soon, but I wouldn't rule it out, and neither should you, or you can rule it out. You can do whatever you want. That's good luck. Any favorite Easter eggs referenced here? Or any that I've missed? I bet there bloody is. So if you have any, please feel free to leave it below. Or if you have any thoughts about how this could link to the MCU, you could also link that below. Or link anything below. That's fine. You can say any words, any combination of words. Also, if you want to subscribe, there's videos here every Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday, including one breaking down the new Aquaman trailer. Also, I have a podcast called The Weekly Planet where we talk movies and comics and TV shows. That's out every Monday morning. And this Monday, the topic is Venom, the movie. What works about it? What doesn't work about it? Where does Sony go from here, if anywhere? It's a bit of a fun time. You might enjoy it. That's linked below. But thanks for watching this. I appreciate it. Take care.